Yo, what's up, what's up, what's up? I'm sorry about the wait. Sorry about the wait. We got a good one today. It's coming in from Hook again. How a man scammed McDonald's for millions of dollars. This one should be really interesting, really good to watch. Let's go ahead and hop into this.
McDonald's hamburgers? And some French fries? Don't they look delicious? And some triple thick McDonald's shakes? Oh.
The fast food business was invented by two brothers who replaced car hop services with takeout windows. Customers didn't like the idea of having to serve themselves and drove off. Business went down.
I really like the movie, the McDonald's movie.
Customers came back.
It's a really good
movie,
couldn't
resist
in my
their
opinion.
Quality hamburgers, fries, and milkshakes. After 15 years, a salesman convinced them to franchise their restaurant. He took charge of opening them and helped the company reach its first billion. But the brothers never got a piece of those profits. In the 1900s, Richard and Morris McDonald were born into a poor family of Irish immigrants in rural New Hampshire. Their father, Patrick, worked as a shift manager at a shoe factory in the city. After 42 years, he was told he was too old to do the job any longer and was laid off. After the brothers discovered he was cut loose without a pension, they knew they had to leave home for a better life. They made up their minds that one way or another, they would be financially independent. When they graduated high school, they vowed to be millionaires by age 50, the opposite of where their dad had been at that age. They dreamt about directing and producing movies and landing gigs. In the 1920s, they moved to California and worked for Columbia Movie Studios. For only $25 a week, they did grunt work, setting up lights and driving trucks, and saved every penny. In 1932, they decided to start their own business and bought a rundown movie theater in Glendora. It was called The Beacon. They opened during the Great Depression and struggled to pay their bills. They even buried silver in their backyard in case the bank foreclosed on them. They usually ate one meal a day, and it was often from a hot dog stand near the theater. It was one of the few places in town that stayed in business. In 1937, the brothers called it quits, sold Beacon, and decided to try their luck in the food business too.
Tough times.
They convinced a lot owner in Arcadia to allow them to set up their own hot dog stand. They knew nothing about food service, but they hired a cook who showed them the ropes. 2 years later, they started scouting for locations for a bigger restaurant and settled on San Bernardino. In 1940, they opened a barbecue restaurant that turned out to be successful. But after World War II, they realized the business wasn't growing even though their parking lot was always full. So they decided to close the restaurant and reopen with a different design, one that they would come up with on their own. In an interview, Richard explained, "Most architects don't really understand drive-ins. Maybe it's because not many ever worked in one." At a tennis court behind their house, the brothers grabbed some chalk and drew a floor plan and equipment layout on the ground. 5 employees joined them and pretended to prepare hamburgers, French fries, and milkshakes.
McDonald's
the brothers'
maybe.
goals were to find the right measurements to create an efficient system. That same night, it rained and the chalk washed away. The brothers had to start all over again. 3 months later, they reopened the restaurant and shortened the menu. Instead of offering dozens of options, they only served hamburgers, fries, and milkshakes. They also replaced their car hop service with takeout windows so that each customer would receive their order in less than a minute. Many of them drove off when a car hop didn't come by their window. Others complained about the limited menu. Business dropped more by half, and the brothers were close to losing everything. In an interview, Richard said,
crazy.
"We almost threw in the towel 3 times. People said we were cuckoo. Nobody wanted to wait on themselves or throw away their own trash." Slowly, the business started to pick up again and drew in huge crowds. By 1953, their gross sales had skyrocketed to over $300,000 annually. A year later, the brothers had sold 21 franchises and opened 9 outlets. At that time, Ray Kroc was a milkshake machine salesman. He kept getting calls from restaurant owners all over the US.
And that's where the movie starts.
"I want one of those mixers of yours, like the McDonald brothers have in San Bernardino, California." He got curious and started looking into them. San Bernardino was a quiet town, practically a desert back then. Yet, the brothers had 8 milkshake machines in the restaurant. It was shocking to Ray since each one cost $150 apiece. One day, he flew from Chicago to Los Angeles for business. The next morning, he drove to San Bernardino to check out the McDonald's Brothers restaurant. It was a typical ordinary-looking drive-in, but it was surrounded by a huge crowd. He peeked inside and saw that the kitchen became an assembly line. One person cooked the burgers, one wrapped them, another one made the milkshakes, and yet another worked at the counter. It was the most impressive operation he had ever seen, so he stuck around for a few hours and introduced himself to Richard and Morris. In his memoir, he wrote, "That night in my motel room, I did a lot of heavy thinking about what I'd seen during the day. Visions of McDonald's restaurants dotting crossroads all over the country paraded through my brain. In each store were 8 multi-mixers whirring away and paddling a steady flow of cash into my pockets." The next day, he told the brothers that he'd seen tons of restaurants and drive-ins, but none had the same potential as theirs. He asked them if they would be open to franchising. The brothers went silent.
Oh no, we got an ad. We'll just ignore that and we'll get right back to it. Here we go.
After a moment, Morris told him, "See that big white house there with the wide front porch? That's our home, and we love it.
Wow.
We sit out on the porch in the evenings and watch the sunset and look down on our place here. It's peaceful. We don't need any more problems. We are in a position to enjoy life now, and that's what we intend to do." Richard said it would be a lot of trouble and questioned who would open the franchises for them. Ray leaned forward and said, "Well, what about me?" By the time he flew back to Chicago, he had a freshly signed contract in his suitcase. In the contract, Ray was given rights to open franchises in the US and receive 1.9% of the gross sales. The brothers would be given 0.5% out of that percentage. Each building would have to have the same design and carry the McDonald's name. He wasn't allowed to do anything differently unless it was approved by the brothers in writing. Even though he was 52 years old, had diabetes and arthritis, he was convinced the best was ahead of him. He started looking for a location right away and found a lot in Des Plaines. That turned out to be the easy part for him. After meeting with a contractor, he realized that there was a problem with the design he had to follow. Unlike the San Bernardino location, he needed to create a basement for the furnace. The brothers told Ray to go ahead and build one, but they never gave their approval in writing. It was then that Ray realized his contract would create a lot of issues. His attorney gave up on the situation. When he hired another one, he quit too and said that he was crazy to continue under such conditions. He warned Ray that if the brothers decided to shut him down, he couldn't protect them. "Let him try," Ray said. In 1955, Ray finally opened his first franchise. Every morning, he went down to the restaurant to help his staff open. In his memoir, he wrote, "The janitor would arrive at the same time I did, and if there was nothing else to be done, I'd help him. I've never been too proud to grab a mop and clean up the restrooms, even if I happen to be wearing a good suit." Until his restaurant made a profit,
Wow.
he continued to sell milkshake machines to pay the rent and his staff. By 1956, he opened a handful of successful franchises, but he still found himself running out of cash and the bank threatened to foreclose on his house mortgage. It was then that his CFO Harry Sonborn pointed out, "We are not technically in the food business, we are in the real estate business. The only reason we sell 15-cent hamburgers is because they are the greatest producer of revenue, from which our tenants can pay us our rent." He came up with an idea to solve their money problems, starting a new company to buy land and buildings and sublease them to franchises. That same year, they launched the Franchise Realty Corporation. Harry's idea worked, and the business significantly increased its revenue. They signed up more franchises and promoted the slogan, "In business for yourself, but not by yourself." It was one of the secrets to their success. But to Ray, it wasn't enough to turn his vision into reality. He wanted to end his relationship with the brothers and buy them out. The brothers asked for $2.7 million in cash and insisted on keeping their San Bernardino restaurant. At the time, it made about $100,000 annually. Ray was furious. He needed the income from that store. Eventually, he opened a McDonald's across the street and ran them out of business. The brothers also asked for 0.5% royalty on all future McDonald's proceeds. Ray agreed but convinced them to keep it out of their contract because it would mess up his accounts. The brothers never received a single cent from the royalties. Today, they would have been worth over $100 million per year. In Ray's memoir, he wrote, "If they had played their cards right, that 0.5% would have made them unbelievably wealthy." This is the story of how it all began with the restaurant that invented the fast food business.
Pretty
Which part did you
much
find
what you're
inspiring?
telling me is this man Ray was a little snake, kind of, in a way. I don't know though. I don't know. To be left decided. You guys tell me what you think. I hope you guys enjoyed the video segment. Thank you from Hook. You guys have a good night. I'm out of here. Peace.